nothing I can do about it because it just wasn't working. So today, though, not an issue. I did a video for another class that I had a meeting and couldn't teach. So I recorded their lesson and it worked out just fine. So today should work out just fine. We're talking about evaluating expressions. And later this week, we'll talk about the parts of expressions. But for the most part, an algebraic expression is just an expression that contains one or more variables. So it's like any equation, but it's got a variable in it, at least one, right? So one or more variables. I want to write in purple. So we don't have the equal sign or anything like that. It's just an expression. If it had an equal sign and it was set equal to something, we wouldn't call it an expression anymore. We'd call it an equation because it was equal to something. To evaluate, we substitute the variables. I should say substitute the variables with their given values, and then we follow order of operations to solve. Anytime you see the word evaluate in math, it means we are going to give you some type of value and you are going to plug it in somewhere. I mean, that's literally what it always is going to mean. It's like if I have, I don't know, x plus 4, and I say that x is equal to 7, it just means that we're going to plug in 7 where the x is and add it to 4. It's not a really complicated function. It's just sometimes that the problems that we're plugging them into can get complicated, right? Today is your lucky day in that I have no intention of doing all 16 example problems. So I will do 8 of them though. Yes, Caitlin. I don't know. Maybe it was her paper first. I think that's mushroom studies. She also has lots of class. For class, she has lots. I was just feeling stupid this morning when I put the worksheet up. That's never wrong, by the way. That is never the wrong answer for the date, right? Yeah. These are all time stamped. I know what the date is. Today is today. Tomorrow is tomorrow until tomorrow when it's today. Not that we're getting crazy here. So I am doing 8 of these problems, and that is it. I think you guys can handle it off of 8 examples. I think you guys can handle it without any examples, but then what would I have to do, right? So if we look at this first problem, it tells us that we have 7x minus 2y. That is our expression. 7x minus 2y is the expression. And it says that x, it says that I'm going to roll this thing. X is going to equal 4. Yes, Leah? Yes. Yes. So if I was going to write this, which I am, I would write this as 7, and where I'm plugging in this 4 for x, this is x equals 4, I'm going to put it in parentheses, so it's multiplication, minus 2 times y. Well, I'm going to put that in parentheses for multiplication as well. And then we can do just the pieces, right? Because now that the numbers are plugged in, we're just going to do our order of operations. And all we have are multiplications and a subtraction. So our multiplications will come first. Yes, Presley. Absolutely. Yeah. So we have 7 times 4, which is 28. And then we have minus 2 times 3, which is 6. And we just get 22. So not too difficult, right? We're going to skip this one. Why? Because I have them mapped out. I want to make like a little zigzag across the, yeah, I'm going to skip on over to 4. Why? Because it looks like it's way more fun. This one, we've got an exponent in, and we have a negative, and it's in parentheses, and we have a 2m. And in this case, all of our m's are equal to 6. So I'm going to do this as negative 6 squared minus 2 times 6. And we're going to deal with our exponent first because if you remember that PEMDAS. Oh, yes, Caitlin? Yeah, it's going to give us whatever value we need to plug in for our variables. So if you notice over in this one that we didn't do, it gave us B. Oh, please don't mess up my. Dang it. Let's see if I can go forward on it. Phew. That could have been bad for me. If you notice on this one, right here on number 3, it's like B equals negative 5 and C equals 2. So we would plug those in respectively. So when we're asked to evaluate something, it's always going to give us the variable. They're going to give us a value for that variable. So any variable in the equation is going to have a value that you're going to plug in, and that's what evaluating means. Yes, Allison. Yes, I can. Is that far enough? I'm gonna move. I'm gonna move me to the other side so you can see better. Except for now, I've got to look right at me, which is very not my favorite thing. So if I have negative 6 squared, negative 6 times negative 6 gives us a positive 36, right? And then we have minus 2 times 6, which is 12. And 36 minus 12 is 24. Does that make some sense? Not too difficult, right? As long as you remember your order of operations, the rest of it's just plugging in the numbers, and then we're doing regular math. Yes, Leah? Yeah, because when you think about this, it's not 6 we're multiplying times itself, right? It's negative times a negative as well. And that negative times the negative makes the positive. So were the negative on the outside of the parentheses, it wouldn't get squared, right? It would just be 6 squared. But because it's on the inside of the parentheses, we've got to square that negative with it. Well, sort of division as well. And it doesn't just necessarily go away anytime you do multiplication or division. It's just when you multiply a negative times another negative, it becomes positive. If you divide a negative by another negative, it becomes positive. So Yeah. She disappeared while I was answering the question. Hope everything's okay. Let's look at this one. This one has a fraction, right? And we know that R, where R is, we're going to input 19, and where S is, we're going to input 7. And so we have 1/2 19. Oops, that's not a 9. I don't know where I was going with that. 19 plus 7. And because we have to do order of operations, even though we have this 1/2 on the outside that's getting multiplied, first we have to deal with the stuff going on inside the parentheses because parentheses come first, right? So 19 plus 7 is 26. And then we multiply that by 1/2, which is the same as dividing by 2, by the way. And we just get 13. Half of 26 is 13. Again, skip this one. We're going to skip this one too. I think we have to for me to keep my zigzag up. I don't want to skip this one though. I kind of like it. So I'm going to actually do this one. I'm going to mess up my whole pattern just because God. Nah, we're going to still skip the pattern. We're going to do it. This one's pretty good right here too. So here I have 3a squared minus ab. Now remember that this 3 is being multiplied to a squared. That a is being multiplied to b at the end of that because they're right up next to each other. So when we go to plug in their values, you want to make sure that you put them in parentheses so it doesn't look like 3 minus 4 squared, right? We want it to be 3 negative 4 squared minus negative 4 for A and negative 3 for B, right? We want to make sure that they're isolated so that we don't, like if I hadn't done that, that would look like minus 4 minus 3, right? And it wouldn't look like a multiplication problem. So putting in those parentheses when they're right next to each other like that and you've got negatives is really important because you don't want to think that it's a subtraction problem. Yes, Allison? Sorry, it's a 3. I just drew it tiny. It's where I plugged in that negative 3, but let me make it neater. I know sometimes it doesn't appear as big on your screen, so it helps to have it be really clear. You're welcome. So we need to go through and do the pieces in order. And the first things we want to deal with are the parentheses, but there's nothing going on inside each parentheses. And when we're talking about parentheses or grouping, we're talking about all the things that are going on inside those parentheses, right? But if you look at this, I can't do anything to negative 4 in there, right? I can't do anything to this negative 4, this negative 3. The sake of these parentheses is just so that we know when we multiply, we've got to include those negatives, right? So we don't have anything to do with the parentheses, so we're going to start with the exponents. And I'm going to go 3 times. Well, negative 4 squared is like saying, this will help, maybe this will help if I do it over here, Leah, is that it's saying negative 4 times negative 4 when we square something. And a negative times a negative gives us a positive, so it would just be positive 16. And yes, that only works when we're multiplying or dividing. When we're adding or subtracting, it doesn't make a positive. And so here we've got 3 times 16 minus negative 4 times negative 3. And now we can just go do all our multiplications in order, right? Everything else is multiplications. We're not going to deal with this subtraction right here until we've done all our multiplications. So 3 times 16 is 48. And if you don't believe me, you know, grab a calculator. And then I've got minus, well, I have negative 4 times negative 3. Well, again, that's a negative times a negative, so it gives us a positive. So 4 times 3 is just 12. And so now we've got 48 minus 12. And 48 minus 12 is going to be 36. So piece by piece, this isn't difficult, but you've got to make sure and take it down to the pieces, right? Don't try and jump the gun on it because you will make mistakes that way. Yes, Presley. How so? Can you help me with? Okay, well, that is fair. Do you understand why we're putting values in, that we're putting values in for the letters? Does that make sense? All right, well, that one is going to take us back like a bit. So we can talk about that if you want to come to tutoring. We can kind of go over all of that. I'm happy to do that with you. I don't know that I could go back and explain it all right this minute because it'll take a little time. But I do have tutoring time and I'm happy to go over that with you. Okay? I will say though that parentheses mean multiplication, right? If something's right up against a parentheses, it means you're multiplying that to it. Yes, Caitlin? Yes, because we had to multiply negative 4 times negative 4 because we squared it. That's what that square means, right? That little exponent up at the top. Yes. All right. And then our order of operations, we had to then we did the subtraction. That's why we did the multiplications first, and then we saved that subtraction for after. So keep in mind parentheses, these sets of parentheses next to each other, that's multiplication, right? Remember when we talked about because that 3 is up against the A, it's multiplication. So when we plug something in for A, we have to put it in parentheses so that we know that we're multiplying and not subtracting. Here's a nice one that's a relief because we're only plugging in for one, but we have a division problem and parentheses and multiplication. But we know that all of the m's are just equal to negative 8. Yeah, Caitlin? Yeah, those two are multiplied to each other. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to do that one. Here's the thing. The problems in your delta math, so much simpler than these, right? But I want to give you access to everything. So if we look at number 9, every m just becomes a negative 8. But see how these two are multiplied, this 2 and this m next to each other? Ooh, sorry about that. Mean multiplication. We're going to put that like a little parentheses in the parentheses, right? Just so we remember to multiply that whole thing because it's a negative number that's going in there. And if I don't put it in parentheses, it looks like we're saying 2 minus 8. So this part is going to be negative 8 divided by 2. 2 times negative 8 is what it means when I put it in that parentheses, minus 4. And remember what we talked about when we were talking about order of operations. If we go back to our order of operations, we said that if we have a parentheses in a parentheses, if you have a grouping in a grouping, you do the one on the most inside first. Do you remember that? Yes. No. Dude, Emma, you're freaking me out. That was crazy. So I'm going to start with what's going on inside the parentheses here. And that is this 2 times negative 8. And 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. And so once I do that, I can put in the minus 4. And now we're going to deal with the next. Oh, it's driving me crazy. And now we're going to put together what's inside the parentheses, right? So we're going to get our negative 8 divided by 2, which I'll deal with in a minute. And then I have minus 16 minus 4. Well, that's just minus 20. Dang, I'm having difficulty with this pen today. It keeps changing my... Well, now we have, all we have left is we have a division, because a fraction, remember, is just a division problem, right? That's saying negative 8 divided by 2, right? What is negative 8 divided by 2? Don't worry about it, Emma. It was hilarious. It's like just a shot of your eyeball. Yes, Allison. Yes, and I see you too, Daniel. I saw that. So we've got negative 4 here, and now we're going to multiply that times negative 20. Is that going to give me a positive or negative answer? If I multiply negative 4 times negative 20, am I going to get a positive answer or a negative answer? Imaginary $1 million question. Gabriel just won $1 million, like in his mind. You can travel somewhere now in your mind too. So we've got this negative times the negative. That's going to make it a positive. 20 times 4 is just 80. So we're going to skip this next one. And we're going to skip this next one. And we're going to move on to number 12. 12, we've got 2 inputs. I don't want to write in purple anymore. I'll write in blue. 12, we have 2 different inputs. We have an input for R and we have an input for S. And we have that R multiplied to the S squared, and then we have that other R that's cubed. That's what it means when it's got a 3. It means we're doing it, multiplying it times itself 3 times, right? So if I'm plugging just the numbers in, I'm going to do it in parentheses to isolate them, to remind ourselves that they're a multiplication. So if I have 5 times R, well, that's negative 3. And then that is times S squared, but S is 4. And then we're going to square it. Plus R cubed, well, that's going to be negative 3 to the 3rd power. That's negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. when we're talking about a cube, right? So we don't have anything going on in any of the parentheses right now. The only thing we have to deal with first now is our exponents. We have to work with these exponents first. So I'm going to rewrite this 5 times negative 3, and I'm going to deal with 4 squared. Well, what is 4 times 4? So we're going to do this right here. We're going to go times 16. That's what the parentheses means. I'm going to try and make it prettier. I don't know how successful I'll be. That's not too bad. And then we've got, think about this one. Please still be there. When I do this problem right here, this part of the problem, right? This is saying that we have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, right? Well, negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. It becomes positive 9. What if I take that positive 9 and I multiply it times negative 3? What happens is we get negative 27. Because once I multiply these two, the first negative 3 times negative 3, we get the 9, right? And it becomes positive. But if we multiply a positive times a negative, we get a negative. And so this becomes minus 27. And so we are good with that back end of the problem, right? Now we have to deal with the front end before we can subtract that 27. Now, I know that it's going to be negative, right? I'm going to be left here with negative, if I start first, right, because it says we do our multiplication in order from left to right. So 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. And then we're going to multiply that times 16 minus 27. I don't know what 15 times 16 is off the top of my head. I actually have to look at the answer on that one or plug it into a calculator, but it's easier to just look at the answer than it is to plug it into a calculator. So it is negative 240. 15 times 16 will give us 240. And because one of them is negative, it'll be negative 240 minus 27. So if you remember when we went back and we were talking about integers, if I have a minus and I subtract more from it, right? It's like adding those two numbers together and giving them a negative sign. Because if you think about it in terms of a number line, if I have a number line and here on the number line is 240, right? Negative 240, right? 0 is like somewhere over here, right? Call that 0. If we subtract another 27, right, and it lands us right here, minus 27, that's going to give us 27 more in the opposite direction. So we add those two numbers together and give them a negative sign. And it is going to give us negative 267 as our solution. Hopefully we'll get you there, Leah. If not, the video is available. So if we lose you, you can still watch the video, okay? But we should get you there. So I just got 2 more. I like this problem. I like this problem because it asks a lot of you. You don't have to do those. You only have to do the ones I do. Good question. Save yourself the work. So I don't even know if I want to do any more of these, actually. I think we're going to call it on this one because I want to show you the delta math, and I'm going to leave these up for you, and we'll come back to them in just a second, but I want to switch over to delta math so that you can see the kind of problems that you'll be working with in delta math and how to solve them. Yes, Presley. Absolutely. I will post the completed version of it to Google Classroom. And you only have to do the ones that I did. You don't have to do any of the ones that are crossed out. You're welcome. So in Delta Math, yes, Jason, how you doing? Uh, I'll have to go back and look at that. Um, where's my 7th grade evaluate expressions? So all you're doing, if you look at these, none of the ones you're going to be doing in your homework are all that complicated. Like here it says make W6, so you'd multiply 7 times 6 is 42, plus 6, 48. So you might need paper to do it, but none of them are going to be all that complicated. They're pretty much one variable. Sometimes though, like in this case, you have to square one of them, right? But it's still, they're all just one variable. I don't see, here we've got 2 variables, but it's still fairly basic, right? We're not doing any of those crazy fractions. I recommend doing it with a piece of paper and a pencil and figuring those problems out. I don't believe there's any division or crazy, crazy problems. And I'm just going through like all the samples of them. It doesn't look like you've got anything super complicated in here to do. But if you have any problems with it, you've got your videos right here. I do have tutoring open at 2 o'clock today. I'm sorry, I have a little something in my throat. It's all going to be on video, me coughing and dying. But so I don't think you'll have any trouble with the Delta Math. I think it's actually simpler than the worksheet itself, than the note sheet itself. I think your Delta Math is a lot easier than that. So I think that you should do okay with it. But if you get hung up on it, don't hesitate to ask those questions. I'm going to stop the recording right now because there's really no reason to be recording this part of our conversation.